Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to my third episode of Most Attacking Chess Gambit. And in this episode, we are going to have a look at the legendary Goring Gambit from the white perspective. The opening arises after the following order: e4, e5. Here white can start with either the move d4 or knight to f3. Let's say in this game, white continue with knight to f3 and after knight to c6. As expected, the d4 move is on the card. Now the first important point you need to know here is black has to capture with the pawn, as if he continue with knight captures d4, then after the simple continuation, knight captures d4, pawn captures d4 and the move queen captures d4. Now black doesn't have a knight to harass the white queen, and that means white queen is nicely placed at the center of the board. So these positions are always better for the white, and that is the reason why at this point black generally capture with the pawn, which allows us to play this superb attacking gambit starting with c3. So guys, this is the starting point of the Goring Gambit, and as you can see, I have highlighted by the arrows, black can accept the second pawn or he can decline the gambit with three different ways, which we are going to see at the end of this video. Now before we dive into, there are two important points I like to mention. Number one, in this lecture I am only going to provide you the overview of this gambit, and then if you really like the gambit, you can do the research by yourself. And the second important point is, a lot of people ask me, where should I apply this gambit? Well, apart from quick and a bullet game, you will be surprised that you can use this gambit against all level of players. The reason is very simple. At the lower level, the theory is not very well known, and that's why you can get crushing win. And on the other side of the coin, even though let's say you are facing a good player and he knows everything about this gambit, by end of this lecture you will understand that with accurate play, black can only able to equalize the game. So in a nutshell, you have a very good drawing chances or might be a winning one. So without the further ado, let's get started. First, obviously we need to look out what happens when black captures the second pawn. And after this, rather than sacrificing the third pawn, my recommendation is you go with the Goring Gambit proper, and that is knight to c3. Now as you can see, I have highlighted by the arrows, black has three optimal setup, and against each of them you will see some nasty surprises. Now amongst all of them, bishop to b4 is a main line, but let's see why other setups are not good at all. Now the first move order I want to consider is where black doesn't care about what white plays, and he routinely churn out this move such as knight to f6 or bishop to c5, and aiming for a solid middle game. But unfortunately against Goring, it's not going to work out. Let's check out why. So let's say black start with any of these moves, knight to f6. Here comes the first memory marker, guys. No matter whatever black plays, our next move is very consistent. Bishop to c4, setting up a good tactical platform. Okay, bishop to c5. So as you can see, at the lower level, black can do these things on a routine basis. But against Goring, it is not going to work out. And now comes the second memory marker. Whenever black plays the move knight to f6 and e5 square is not controlled, then we will meet it with e5. So remember, knight to f6 can be met with e5. Black has two choices. The first one is obviously very bad one, and the simple reason is, can you guess it? Yup, this simple but dazzling sacrifice which happened again and again in the Goring Gambit. Boom! The point is, after king takes f7 and the move queen to d5, not only white is gaining his piece back, but at the end of the scenario, we have an equal material and black king is completely caught at the center of the board. Now generally e5 has been countered with d5, but again the beauty about the Goring Gambit is here we are going to continue with e captures f6 and after d captures c4. Majority of the game in the database continue with queen captures d8. However, I am going to introduce my own suggestion, and that is f captures g7. Allowing black to capture our queen and misplace our king. But now the beauty is we get this forcing sequence, rook to g8, knight to d5, threatening two things. So black response is force. Black has to play king to d8, avoiding both the threat. And now another forcing move, bishop to g5. Here it doesn't matter however black blocks. Let's say one of my game continue with bishop to e7. I simply capture with the knight, and after knight captures e7 and the move rook to e1, it is already looking quite scary for the black camp. Well, again black has the only move in this position, namely bishop to e6. But after this, my assault continue with knight to d4. And if black really goes with the king to d7, then I can simply park my king in the corner and then play the move rook to d1, and white has a hell lot of good position. So in the game, my opponent thought that, okay, just give up on e6, take on g7, that might work. But unfortunately, he ran straight into the first Goring Gambit trap, and that occurs after bishop captures e7, king captures e7, and now this deciding blow, knight to f5, and white is winning the exchange just within 17 moves of the game. So as you can see, if black continue with bishop to c5 and knight to f6, then he get the nasty hit with e5. So some of the solid and positional player will come up with the second obvious setup, and that is bishop to e7 first, and after our trademark move bishop to c4, they stop our e5 advancement with d6, saying that okay, I have no issues, now I'm going to play knight to f6 and castle, and you are a clear pawn down, sweetie. Yup, to some extent it looks like a true in this position. But here comes the second important memory marker, guys. You have to remember this important tactical pattern when black opt for this slow setup. Meet with queen to b3 and suddenly the f7 pawn is a corner. Knight to h6 is not a possibility due to simple move bishop captures h6. So accordingly here, black has the only good counter-attacking move, knight to a5. But this can successfully negotiate with the following sequence, bishop captures f7, king to f8, and now very nice move, queen to a4. Yes, indeed, we are giving up the bishop pair, but in return, we are getting our material back. And the most important thing is, again in these lines, black king is completely misplaced. And not to forget that we have the king side pawn majority that help us to create attack on this weak king. So picture is very clear. If black continue with any sort of slow moves, then white get a quick upper hand in the opening. So accordingly, bishop to b4 is only move in this position where black can fight for some sort of advantage. Okay, no issues. We are going to continue with our trademark move, bishop to c4, keeping our threats as it is. So for example, if black continue with knight to f6, we are going to respond with e5, and slow moves such as d6 can be successfully met with queen to b3. And you can check these lines in the PGN where I have covered them in somewhat detail. So accordingly, the best move in this position is bishop captures c3, and after pawn captures c3, black can argue that not only he is a pawn up, but white pawns are completely shattered on the queen side. So what can be the more natural than this? And yes, it's right because it's one of the main line, but you will be surprised that white even get very fun positions even from this ugly setup. Okay, black has to somehow stop the move e5, so d6 is a natural response, liberating the other bishop. And here white has few choices, such as knight to g5 or the move queen to b3. However, my recommendation is this straightforward move, castle on the king side. First, get the king safe, and now become hell loose to create attack on the black camp. The important point you should note that black can never play here bishop to g4 as it successfully met with queen to b3. So accordingly, black has tried two moves, knight to f6 and knight to e7. Well, amongst them, one is a pretty bad one. So if your opponent continue with knight to e7, then here comes the second trap on the table. We will now straight away assault on the king side with knight to g5. And after castle, you can easily guess the next move. Yup, there is no control on h5, so the queen literally leap in on a juicy h5 square where he attacked two spots, and unfortunately black cannot defend both of them. Well, the game can be finished very quickly, and in fact this happened in the database even against the strong players. Black plays h6, white plays the very natural knight captures f7, and now believe it or not, but black has to give up the queen, as either the queen move or knight to a5. We can simply respond with this forcing checkmate. Knight to h6 check, a double discover check, king has to move, and then simplest move in the world, knight to g4, a 13 move miniature. So again, black is forced to play the only move, knight to f6 in this position. And at first sight, it looks like black has defended every single thing and he has a clear pawn up. But this is what I like about this gambit. The fun never ends, and we can continue with this thematic break. e5, setting up the third important trap. Well, black has to take with the knight. Why? What happens if we continue with d captures e5, which looks again a kind of natural move, but in fact it's a big time mistake, as after knight to g5 attacking on f7, when black castles, you will now see the potential of capturing the c3 pawn with the b pawn, as when white played this nasty move, bishop to a3, by force, black is an exchange down. Well, he can swap the queen, but that doesn't solve the problem, as that rook can't hide anywhere. So you can see how tricky this gambit is, and black has to know a lot of moves. Okay, so now we look at the mainline move, knight captures e5. Well, after that, my recommendation is you should continue with knight captures e5, and after pawn captures e5. If white wish, he can get his one of the pawn immediately. But nope, we are not going for the pawn grabbing. Instead, we are looking for the attack. And rightly so, white should continue with this second tactical theme, queen to b3. Again, black cannot castle, and you know why? Yup, our thematic bishop moves, and that poor guy is more or less trapped there. So that's right out of the equation. So black has to defend on f7, and the only logical move here is queen to e7. After that, we will continue with bishop to a3, getting those lovely diagonals, so that if the queen moves, then black king will be permanently stuck in the center. So accordingly, black has the only move in this position, namely c5. After this, you have to know some of the theory, and just remember this check, guys, which again creates some headache in the black camp. If king to f8, then we can play c4, and black king is clearly misplaced. So accordingly, black can block the check with either of the pieces. Amongst them, knight to d7 is a pretty bad move, and the simple reason is, after rook a to d1, castle on the king side, and now we can just mount the pressure on d7 with queen to d5, which forces knight to f6. And after that, the simplest move in the world, queen captures c5, and that rook hunt down scheme crop up again and again, and that is why it is really fun to play such a gambit. Okay, so that means bishop to d7 is forced, and after that, my recommendation is you go for this simple sequence, bishop captures d7, forcing black to capture with the knight, and after that, we can respond with queen captures b7, hitting the rook in the corner. Black can now castle in order to support the rook. Another forcing move, rook to d1. So again, black has to address the weak knight with rook to d8. So you can see up till this point, every single move is forced. And now comes the sting in the tail. And this is what I like about the gambit. If this is the main line, then white is quite happy to go into it, as after the final deciding blow, bishop captures c5, white is getting his all material back with a huge active play. Well, the base response goes as follows: queen captures c5. Now we play rook captures d7, threatening rook captures f7. So again, black response is forced. Black has to capture on d7. And here, white should capture the rook on a8, which forces black queen to retrieve back. And after that, nope, we are not interested in the queen trade. Instead, we are looking to play queen to e4. So by end of this transaction, not only white get a pass c pawn, but there is an attack on e5. And all in all, if this is the main line, then I'm quite happy to go into this, as lower rank opponent will never reach to this position, and if we are getting this position against a higher seed, well, draw or win is pretty good result for the white camp. So in a nutshell, if your opponent accepts the gambit, then I think white is quite happy, as all these variations are giving good advantage to the white camp. Finally, we come to the part where we need to see what happens if your opponent declines the gambit. And amongst them, the first move I want to consider is d3. So what black is doing is, okay, I'm giving you pawn back, but in return, your knight cannot develop on a natural square. But after bishop captures d3, I think it is black who is fooling himself, as now he cannot play actively with his dark square bishop. Well, obviously, if we continue with bishop to e7, then we are more than happy, as black remain very passive. So the big question arises, what happens if we continue actively with bishop to c5? Okay, here is the answer. First, we are going to continue with b4, and after bishop to b6, you can either choose the move a4 or knight to d2, and in either case, it is white who get early queenside space in the game. My personal preference is knight to d2, and it doesn't matter whether black continue with a5 or a6. Let's say a6, we will play knight to c4, attacking the bishop, and when the bishop retrieve, the another jab in the center, e5, which completely restrict the kingside knight. After knight to e7 and castle, you can see the big problem in the black camp, as in order to free up his light square bishop and the rook in the corner, he has to play either the move d6 or d5, and whenever this happen on the board, we can simply lop it off and give black this horrible d6 pawn, which can be turned out a big time target in the upcoming middle game. The second move I want to consider is knight to f6, which again I don't like it, as it allows white to gain the space in the center with e5. If knight to e4, then queen to e2 is a very strong move, and I have attached a sample line in the PGN. So the most frequent choice here is knight to d5, but after that we can simply capture on d4, and white position already looking quite good in the opening stage. If d6, then bishop to b5 is a strong reply. So again, the most popular choice is bishop to b4 check, but we can safely negotiate with bishop to d2, bishop captures d2, and now queen captures d2. The point is, when black continue with d6, trying to undermine our center, we can simply respond with knight to c3, and it doesn't matter whether black capture our knight or take on e5. Let's say knight captures c3, queen captures c3, pawn takes e5, and pawn takes e5. Again, we have the scenario where white has the leading development, and even the best response such as queen to d5 doesn't help at all, as we can simply continue with bishop to e2, and when black play the book move queen to e4, we can simply exchange the queen with queen to c4, which leads to a position which I personally like as a white, due to the simple reason white has the space as well as the leading development. So considering all this factor, I think probably the best response here for black is to play d5, counter-attacking the white center. And against this, my recommendation is you should capture on d5, And when black recapture, you should capture with the c pawn. So the idea is very simple. We are making a way for our c3 knight. And in my past, I have created a video with the move knight to f6 where I have recommended a system for the black. But again, those lines can only equalize. So accordingly, if black want any advantage, then the main line goes with the move bishop to g4, pressurizing the d4 pawn. But now it is white who is going to develop with attack. Knight to c3, bishop to b4, pinning down the knight. And now this simple move, bishop to e2. So this is pretty much played in majority of the games. And here black has tried two choices. If he castle at this point, then this is a very risky variation as white can castle as well. And now in the view of queen is hanging, black has to take on c3. Afterwards, b capture c3 and the move knight to f6. The first obvious thing you can notice here that white has this open b file which help him to create attack on the black king. And the second important feature is white has the center and the bishop pair, which is always a deciding factor in the upcoming middle game. All in all, I think as per the database, this position is quite favorable for the white camp. So by far, the most popular line here is bishop captures f3, bishop captures f3, and now black can't capture on d4 as after bishop captures c6, he will simply lose the queen. So that is right out of the equation. But black's big idea is he wants to play queen to c4, stopping white castle on the king side. Again, I really like these lines from the white perspective as white has this nice move in this position. Bishop captures c6, forcing black to capture with the pawn, or else if he continue with queen captures c6, then we can simply castle, and if black thinks that he can win the pawn here by doing this transaction, then he's completely fooled, as after rook check, knight to e7 and the move bishop to g5, black king will be completely remain in the center and most likely his knight is going to lost in a few moves. You might say, hang on, why can't black play f6? Well, he can, but then white pieces just hit the queen with rook to c1, and after queen to b4 and the move bishop to f4, rook to c7 is coming in the picture, and again if black try to save the pawn with c6, well, guess what, white has tricked black and rook to b1 is a winning move. So again, the majority of the game continue with b captures c6. And here white has two choices. If you want an interesting option, then I can suggest queen to b3 and you can do the research by your own. But my recommendation is this simple move, queen to e2, which forces the queen trade, and after king takes e2, the net result is, yes, indeed, white has a weak pawn on d4, but look at the black queen side, it has been completely shattered. And as the result shown, this position is slightly better for the white camp. That's it guys. I hope with this small video, now you are eager and confident enough to play this gambit on the board. As I have shown throughout the lecture, it doesn't matter whether black capture the pawn or decline. Overall, it is white who get the exciting package and better winning chances. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment, and I will meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.